today I'm here to talk about positioning because I think positioning is one of the most important concepts for growth at a startup, and it is tragically misunderstood. One of the reasons positioning is so important is because as startups, we operate in super crowded markets. Now, we say it so much, it's almost like a cliche. Markets are crowded. But I don't think we really feel in our gut just how bad that really is. So I'm going to give you an example. What you're seeing is Scott Brinkler's marketing technology landscape. So if you think about all the software solutions on the planet, this is Scott's attempt to model just one tiny corner of that. So just the solutions for marketers. And look at that thing. There's 350 companies on there. If you run marketing at one of those 350 companies, your job is to stand out from everybody else on that slide. And imagine you're a customer. I've got to make sense out of all 350 of those before I can pick what's what. Now, the first time I encountered this slide, I thought, okay, 350, that's too many. Maybe this is 2012. Maybe the market's consolidating now. Customers couldn't possibly figure this out. So I went digging for a 2018 slide to see, well, there's probably way less on there now, right? That's so wrong. There's 7,000 companies on that slide. That means in the last 5 years, there's 6,650 new companies have moved into this space. Your startup is merely one choice in an ocean of choices. So one of the big things you have to do is figure out, how am I going to make it that my stuff is obviously awesome in the middle of all this? So how exactly do we do that? If you look at the research around this, the research shows that customers use what they know to figure out what they don't. So they use what they already understand to figure out things that they've never encountered before. And when they do this, they use two frames to figure it out. The first one is market categories. The second one is trends. Market categories help us answer the questions, what the heck is this thing and why should I care? Trends help us answer the question, why is this important to me right now? So let's start with market categories. Market categories are neat. They're kind of a short form way of us to figure out what's what in this ocean of things. If you look at Scott's chart, he's attempted to categorize things by colors. So the red stuff there is advertising tech. The yellow stuff is social. Let's say I'm a marketer and I decide I want a chat thing to communicate real time with my customers. I look at this chart and I say, well, that kind of sounds like social. And then if I get even more granular on that, I can see there's a box in there called bots and live chat. And that's pretty good. Now I'm not looking at 7,000 solutions anymore. I'm looking at a couple of dozen. Now, that's not the only thing that a market category does. When I declare that my product lives in a certain market category, I set off a really powerful chain of assumptions in the minds of customers. It looks a little bit like this. If I say I'm in a market, you will make some assumptions about who my competitors are, what the pricing should be, what the features are, who my target customer is. If I say my solution is email, who's my competitor? Gmail, Outlook. How much does it cost? Well, it's free-ish. It's free if you're not a big enterprise. What are the features? Well, it's got an inbox. It lets me mark spam and stuff. Who's my target customer? Pretty much anybody. Now, let me give you an example. If I declare this market category well, I'll set off all of those assumptions, and by declaring the category, the assumptions do a bunch of work for me. Now, it works the opposite way as well. If I make a poor job of declaring the market category and the assumptions that it triggers are not true about my product, I will spend a significant amount of my marketing and sales effort undoing those assumptions. So let's come back to email for a second. I get a call from a startup in Silicon Valley, and they tell me, we have customers, they love our stuff. The problem is getting them over the hump to be a customer in the first place. Nobody can understand what we do. And I said, well, that's great. Pitch me your stuff. And they said, what we have is, we're a bunch of ex-lawyers. And what we have is we've developed email for lawyers. And I said, well, that's fascinating. I didn't know lawyers needed special email. Show me what you guys do. So he starts giving me the demo. And we get about halfway through the demo, and I said, that's really interesting. Like, where is the calendar? And he said, we don't have a calendar. Do you know what you call email without a calendar? Crappy email. It's crappy email. You don't buy email without a calendar. I've never had email without a calendar. That's what it is. And I said, well, that's crazy. So what does everybody love about your stuff? And they said, well, we have this thing. It's context-aware file sharing. And they start telling me about how that works, and it's super secure. File sharing is not a thing I expect in my email. So eventually, as we work together, we shift the context, and they shifted from being email for lawyers to being team collaboration for lawyers. Now, when they pitch people, all the assumptions are different. If I say I'm team collaboration, who am I competing with? Slack, probably. Team collaboration for lawyers, well, that probably does some good things around file sharing, right? So everybody's a lot closer to where they need to be. The great thing about that one, too, is the change in the pricing. When they said email, everybody was like, oh, that must be free. And then they said team collaboration, well, that costs more money. Team collaboration for lawyers, I kept joking with them, you should probably just charge by the minute. See how the lawyers like that. The interesting thing about this is you would think that this is so important, we'd be really good at it. And we'd be doing this, there'd be a stage in our launch where we'd say, let's figure out our positioning. And in fact, we never do it at all. Most of the startups I've worked for, and there have been 7 of them. 6 of those startups got acquired, and then I ended up working at big companies. All told, I launched 16 products, and every single one of those we ended up repositioning at some point because we didn't do it deliberately at the beginning. I'll give you an example. I had one where I joined as the head of marketing, and what we had was enterprise CRM. Now, today, if I told you I was enterprise CRM, you'd say, well, you must compete with Salesforce. But this was a few years back, and Salesforce was only in the mid-market. The enterprise, there was this company called Siebel, and they were giant, $2 billion revenue, 8,000 employees. We were a crummy little startup in Canada. Hey, how's my accent? Do you understand everything? Good, yeah? When I leave, just clap. And so they were $2 billion revenue in Silicon Valley, 8,000 employees. We were this little Canadian startup with 30 employees doing $2 million revenue. So we'd go into a customer and say, hi, we're enterprise CRM. And they'd say, great, how are you better than Siebel? And we'd say, well, we're cheaper. And that was about it. And so occasionally we'd land a deal, but we'd have to discount the crap out of it to get it to close. And this kept happening until we actually had a lucky break. We hired a sales rep that had a relationship with the head of investment banking at Goldman Sachs. You know Goldman Sachs? It's like Macquarie with harsher accents. So we went in and we pitched Goldman Sachs, and we did have a feature that was really unique and different from Siebel. The problem was we didn't really understand who might care about it. So we always showed it in the demo, but most of the time people just kind of went, I don't really care about that thing. In this case, we went into demo to the head of Goldman Sachs. We showed him the feature, and he's like, stop, right there, that thing. Show it to me again. And so we showed it to him again. And then he said, whoa, do you mean I can model if 2 people sit on a board together? And we said, yeah. And he said, I can model if this person used to work with that person. I said, yeah. He said, hang on, I got to get my vice presidents. So he runs down the hall, he gets a couple of vice presidents. They run back, and he's like, show them that thing, the thing you showed me. And so we showed them the thing, and they got really excited, and they were asking the same questions. Wait, are you saying you can model this with this? And we said, yeah, you can. And they got so excited. They were in the office, like jumping up and down with excitement. Have you ever been in a room with a room full of super excited investment bankers? It's terrifying. So so everybody got excited. We closed the deal. And then we had a thought. Well, investment bankers seem to dig our stuff. Let's go try it with some other investment bankers. And the same thing would happen. We would walk in, we say hi, we show them the thing, everybody jumps up and down, we close some business. So we went to the office. Now, importantly, we went to the office and we said, maybe we've been positioning this wrong. maybe we're not enterprise CRM. Maybe what we are is CRM for investment banks. Now, that might not sound like a big change to you, but let me tell you, it was a big change for the board. Try going in and telling your board, oh, we're not enterprise CRM for everybody now. We're just for investment banks. The board was stressed about this. They're like, you're kidding me. This is a tiny little market. How are you ever going to make any money? And so the way we argued it with them is we said, look, nobody likes our stuff anyway. So why don't we just say we're for investment banks, and maybe investment banks will come to us, and it'll make it easier to say why we're different than Siebel. And once we've got all the investment banks, then we'll widen it out, and we'll go after insurance companies, or we'll go after retail banks. So we did it, and we did the shift. And the shift was transformational to this company. So the first thing is we go in, and instead of saying, hi, we're CRM, how are you better than Siebel? We go in and say, hi, we're CRM for investment banks. And they'd say, huh, do you compete with Siebel? We say, no. We love them. They're fantastic. They are a great, great, great company. And they're a fantastic product if you're a call center or a manufacturing plant or whatever, not you, Wolf of Wall Street. You need something special. Let me show you the thing. And then I would show them the thing, and then everybody would jump up and down, and then we would close the business. And the great thing was that the pricing went way up, so we were always discounting, but much like the lawyer thing, right? You come in and you say, I've got a special thing for investment bankers, and it's not cheap, because you're special. So we put the price way up. We put a 0 on the end. Everybody loved it. It did this one thing. It was fantastic, and it was just for investment banks. The crazy thing was, and then we went nuts. We were doing $2 million. When I started, in 18 months, we were doing $80 million revenue. And Siebel got so sick of us kicking their tail all up and down Wall Street that they acquired us for $1.7 billion. And our board thought it was too small. Anyway, so it's good, right? It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, we're happy. All right, so if that's what you want to do, if your whole bag is, I've got to pick the best market for my thing to be in, how do I do that if there's multiple markets that I could be in? How do I figure it out? So the first thing you have to do is you have to kind of figure out what are my strengths, and then position so that your strengths are right in the middle of the market category that you choose. So think of your features as little emojis. And most of your features are just kind of meh emojis. Like everybody's got those, and those are okay, you need to have them. But if you go and talk to your happy customers right now and say, why do you love us? When you tell other people about us, what do you talk about? What is the reason you picked us in the first place? You will find that there are a subset of those things that are fire. It's the stuff that everybody loves you for. That is your secret sauce. Then what you want to do is you want to think about all the market categories you could potentially be in. If I go back to my email example, the email for lawyers, guys, they could say they were an email. They could say they were chat. The problem with that is, like, they don't have calendar for email. That's bad. And for chat, nobody makes money in chat. Sorry. But if you looked at what they were really, really good at was this file sharing thing. So it made sense to put that in team collaboration, because team collaboration, file sharing is right in the middle of that, so it makes sense with what you're doing. Let me give you another example. So this is a company I worked with. They're in Canada. And the founders of this company have degrees in mechatronics engineering, and they're like robot guys, and they make robots. And eventually, they came up with this idea for this thing on your right, which is a robot that drives around a manufacturing plant. And what it does is it takes things from one place to another. Now, if you're not into robotics like me, you might think, well, that doesn't sound so hard. How hard can that be? It turns out it's really hard. That thing is chock full of sensors and mapping, and they've got a giant team of people working on artificial intelligence. So they have this super sophisticated thing for manufacturers like the world has never seen before, and they go out to try and sell it to manufacturing plants, and they walk in and they say, hello, we are ClearPath Robotics, and we have this fantastic new robot. And everybody in the room goes, ugh, robots. Because in manufacturing, they've had robots for decades. And when you say robots, they're thinking about that thing over there. It's a machine that does jobs that are too stupid for humans. Like, it basically picks up a plastic bucket and puts it in a box. It doesn't move around. There's no sensors. There's no mapping. There's certainly not a lot of artificial intelligence going on in there. So what this company was finding was they had to have 9, 10, 11 meetings with this manufacturer before they could really understand why this thing was special. So eventually they went back and they said, you know what, maybe our positioning as a robot is not doing us any favors. Maybe we could position it as something else to make it easier for people to understand why our stuff is awesome in the first place. So they went back and they said, okay, what are we really good at? Mapping, sensors, driving around, artificial intelligence. And it dawned on them, maybe what we've invented is a self-driving car. In fact, maybe it's a self-driving car for manufacturers. In fact, what they call it is autonomous vehicles for indoor spaces. So they did this repositioning, and they said, okay, we're not robots. Robots are yesterday. What we are is autonomous vehicles for industrial spaces. And they go back in and they pitch it to the same manufacturers. Again, all the assumptions are different. They don't expect to be compared to other robots. Of course it drives around. Of course it's full of artificial intelligence. Of course it's probably kind of expensive. That stuff sounds sort of cool. The other thing that's interesting about these guys is they really went deep on the positioning. So if you look at that picture, it's got little white headlights on the front and little red taillights on the back. It's a robot. It doesn't need any lights at all. Those are actually just there to drive home this idea that they're a robot. And they renamed the product the Auto. The neat thing, too, about these guys is not only did it help them from a sales perspective, but they were fundraising. And the founder told me a story about how they went to Silicon Valley and they pitched a VC and they said, well, we've got these little things and they're like these little robots and they drive around. And the VC said, do they vacuum? Is it like one of those things? And they were so mad because they're like artificial intelligence guys. No, we're not a vacuum. And then they repositioned the thing as autonomous vehicles. And then they get to go back to the same VCs and say, we're like self-driving cars. You ever heard of this guy, Elon Musk? You should invest in some of this over here. And they raised like giant $30 million round. Yay, everyone was happy. So that's market categories. The second piece is market trends. So market trends are interesting because they're different from categories. And in tech, we often get the two things confused. So, the best way I've found to describe it is every year there's this company called Pantone. You know these guys? They're like the color people. And every year they come out with this thing called the color of the year. And apparently it's based on research. And they look at fashion and things, apparently. And then they put out a press release and they say the Pantone color of the year is, this year it was ultraviolet purple for normal people. And they say purple's the color of the year, that's it. And the next thing you know, we got purple couches, purple lipstick, purple whatever. If you have a purple couch, you're still in the couch business. Purple is a trend that makes your couch seem hip and cool and now. But the couch is your market category. In tech, we're terrible at this. In tech, we completely confuse the two things. So markets are kind of like groups of solutions that I can compare to each other when I want to buy something. So things like CRM is a market category, networking gear is a market category, accounting software is a market category. Trends are things that can be applied to those market categories. So I can take AI and apply it to any of those categories. Machine learning, any of those categories. Blockchain, maybe some of those categories. Augmented reality, things like that. So the two things are separate. That's the first thing to know. Now, trends are important because people love trends, particularly the media and people that write and speakers like me. We love trends because it's the new thing. Customers like learning about the new thing because they like to be on top of their industry and what's new and happening. They're also a little bit worried about getting left behind, and maybe there's something about this AI stuff they need to know about because if they don't, it's going to be harmful to their business. So the best way to think about it is the trends can kind of spice up your market a little bit. It doesn't completely redefine the market, but it can certainly make you hot. So what you really want is to find the intersection between your solution, your market, and relevant overlapping trends. Now, there's loads of ways to mess this up. I'll tell you 2 ways to mess it up, and then I'll give you a good example. But if you're not quite in the center, if there's one place you want to err, you can err on the side of, I got a solution to market context, but we're not too trendy. That's fine. And in business-to-business software, I can give you plenty of examples of companies that made a pile of money not being trendy, and that's okay. So if you're going to be anywhere not on the center, be down at the bottom here. This is okay. Where things get really dangerous is where you're kind of in the other 2 quadrants. So let's say I've got the overlap of my solution and I'm trying to bring in trends and I've sort of forgotten about the market context. My favorite example of this is I got this call from this company in Silicon Valley and they had just raised this spectacular amount of money and they said, we think we might have a positioning problem, April, maybe you can help us out. I said, sure, what do you guys do? And they said, we are the sharing economy for pets. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all, dude. What is that? The sharing economy? You're sharing pets? People are sharing pets? The guy was getting really mad at me because I'm too stupid to understand his cool thing. And he just kept saying sharing economy for pets. And I'm like, dude, that doesn't mean anything at all. And he said, so eventually he got so frustrated. And he said, no, you don't understand. We're Uber for cats. And I was like, I'm into the Uber for cats thing. I'm like... Send them to my house right now. We're going to go drive it. It's going to be fantastic. I love Silicon Valley. They taught the cats how to drive. And then they're really mad at me at this point. They're like, shut up, lady. You don't know anything. And eventually, when they got really mad, they told me what they actually did, which was they're like a marketplace for pet services. If you want a groomer to come to your house, a groomer comes to your house. I was so disappointed that the cats weren't driving. I was like, yeah, whatever, dude. So long live Silicon Valley. But anyway, so you got to be careful in there. If you don't tell me what market category you're in, you're going to get in trouble, right? So you can't leave that out. The last quadrant is where I'm talking about a category and I'm talking about a trend, and I've got so excited about how hip and cool all this is, I've forgotten all about my own product. You'd be amazed how much this happens, particularly when there's something really hot like AI or blockchain. My favorite example of this right now is, maybe you've heard this story. There's this company in the United States called Long Island Iced Tea. They literally make iced tea, and they're publicly traded on the NASDAQ, weirdly enough. And so anyways, their stock price has been going down. They're threatened to get delisted from the NASDAQ if they don't do something in a hurry to puff the price up. And so apparently they got together and they met and they said, we're going to do a rebrand and we're going to change our name to Long Island Blockchain. And they did this, like this actually happened. So they put out a press release, no, we're Long Blockchain now. And there was no partnerships, no tech, nothing to do with, absolutely nothing to do with blockchain. So I'm reading this thing in my office. I said, like that's going to work, right? And it totally worked. The stock went up by 400%, and it stayed there for 2 weeks. And the whole time I'm thinking, everything I thought was true is wrong. I'm in the wrong business. I need to talk to somebody like my bartender. And I was all bummed out. But then after 2 weeks, what happened is the stock pickers kept asking them, well, dude, what about the blockchain? Like, you don't have any story around the blockchain? And eventually they realized, oh, God, there's nothing here. And so they sold off. And then all the people that bought their stock because they thought iced tea was okay, it was like, these people have lost the plot. And they sold off. And then the stock went down to practically zero, and I felt better, and they got delisted, and that's the end of that story. So you have to be careful that you don't get. So what you want is the fire spot right in the middle. So last example. I love this example because it's an example of a company that is in a market that's maybe not that hot, and they managed to kind of spice it up with some trend stuff. So I don't know if you know Redgate Software. They're one of my favorites. They've been around for ages, and what they do is database tools. It's not super sexy, but they have 300-400 employees. They have 800,000 users. They're doing all right in a not sexy market. Their 2 problems really were 2 things. One, they have dozens of products, and when they looked at how customers bought from them, the customers were generally buying 1 or 2 products and not taking advantage of everything that the Redgate folks had. The other thing was that they could never get any press. Like, their thing wasn't cool. People didn't want to write about it, and so they wanted to kind of make sure that people understood that this stuff, even though it seems kind of boring, is important to what's going on right now. So they looked at their customer base, and what they saw was that they sell into dev shops, and what they noticed that most of the dev shops were in the middle of a DevOps transformation. And one of the things they saw was nobody's talking about data or how databases fit in this DevOps transformation. So they put out a positioning paper on this. They developed a point of view around it. They started going around and giving talks about database DevOps and why that's important. And all of a sudden, their thing that was kind of not so cool, not so hot, is super relevant to what their customers are doing right now. Two things changed. One was that there was a dramatic uptick in the way their salespeople were selling into accounts. Instead of just selling one product, they were now selling the whole suite of products because they could understand better how everything fit together. The second thing was they got 100 times increase in the number of inbound inquiries. That's what happens when you're kind of hot. There's this book written by me. Don't buy it. In fact, you can't buy it because it's not out yet. But it comes out early next year. And if you want to kind of geek out on positioning, you can visit positioningbook.com and sign up for it. Or you can just follow me on Twitter. And when it comes out, I'll be so happy. I'll be tweeting about it all the time. And you guys are awesome. If you don't understand anything I say, this is the clapping part. Clap now.